It's Hollie's Hotspurs, welcome back. Talking Tottenham every week, no better place to be sat. If it's a win, lose, draw, we'll be here for a chat. Best believe we tackle topics like Romero in the back. Young Min Son, what can go wrong when he's on form? It's a dream come true, so sit back, relax and vibe with us. Special guests every time here to discuss. Bring your passion, come along for the ride, and don't forget to subscribe, cause...
Hello and welcome to another episode of Hollie's Hotspurs Live, where tonight we do have a draw to dissect, which was 2-2 against Manchester United, but at least it wasn't a loss, and at least it was at home, so we've actually picked up some points there, which is nice. And with me to do so, I am joined by two fabulous guests. So first of all, Becky, it's amazing to have you back on the show. How are you, my friend?
Very good, Holly. Thanks for having me back on. Yeah, we were just saying off air, it's been a while. I think I haven't done a YouTube channel, I think, since about February. And obviously a lot was happening for Spurs in between, winning the Europa League and having a new manager. So I'm leaving. But yeah, I was at the game on Saturday. So when you kind of said, can I come on? I was like, do you know what? Yes, we'll come back and I'll talk about the how close we got to finally getting rid of that not winning at home in the league hoodoo. But yeah, quite a lot to get through. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, like I say, thank you for having me on. It's great to have you back on with us. And making her debut, we're joined by Ali. Ali, it's amazing to have you on. How are you, my friend?
I am very good. I feel bad though, because not only have I not got a Tottenham shirt on, which I could have done really, couldn't I? But I've got the most boring background you'll ever see. So I can only apologise for that. But it is a joy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm excited.
No, it definitely should be a good one. Like I say, thank you both for joining me. And thank you to everybody that's tuning in live as well. It's great to have you all here. Like I say, we've got an awful lot to dissect. But without further ado, let's kind of crack on with it. Let's get into it. So obviously we managed to get a point at home, which, Becky, I'll come to you first. Obviously it's quite nice. I know it's not that win, but it's nice to pick up something at home, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think going back to, it's been quite an eventful week for Spurs, really. You know, Chelsea was so poor and so kind of lackluster, and then you had Copenhagen in the week, which actually kind of seemed to remind us of why we all love Spurs in the first place, the kind of attacking intent and the kind of the atmosphere, despite there not being a full stadium. And then I think myself and Jack, we kind of went into Saturday not really knowing what to expect. We weren't really sure were we going to get, you know, a kind of Premier League sort of stalemate. Was it going to be quite a drab affair, or was it going to be, you know, kind of Europa League, kind of somewhere in between, you know, because the final wasn't the greatest final in the world, but it, you know, obviously we had that kind of hold over United and the 4 wins from last season. So I personally kind of wasn't sure what we were going to expect, and you know, kind of being there, you know, would have taken a draw before kickoff, probably, but would we have taken a draw with only kind of 1 minute to go? Not really. I think the way that they came back and showed that kind of fight in the second half, it really felt like a kind of loss when we were kind of leaving the stadium. But like I said, if you kind of think over the run of games at home has been so poor, not just this season, going back to last season as well. I think it's something like 3-19 or 3-20. It's not good enough. You know, our form in the at home in Europe is fantastic. We've got almost the exactly opposite record. So I think, yeah, it was nice to see attacking football. It was nice to see goals. I think some of the changes that Frank made, he still doesn't really know his best side yet. I know there's injuries and things, and we've got games coming in thick and fast. But yeah, I think for me, it was nice to see a little bit more kind of from the lads, really, and kind of, you know, the crowd sort of supporting that as well.
I think that's the biggest thing, because like I say, I didn't really know what to expect either, Ali. And going into home games at the minute, I'm a bit wary of how we're going to play, because our away form's a lot better, so to speak. So how did you kind of find the game yourself?
Yeah, so I didn't see it, unfortunately, because I was working. But it's always quite interesting when that happens as well, because you get all the fan reaction and then you see the actual highlights, and it's like, oh, there's a bit of a disconnect here between how annoyed these fans are and what we actually did. But I think the grievances with the first half were well founded. Like, the first half looked awful, and obviously turned it around in the second. And I think to be honest, and this isn't a hot take by any means, but to me, that's the biggest difference under Frank, which I think is a positive one, is that last season and the season before, like, those are games that we would have then just lost. we would have just completely capitulated and just lost like 2-3-0. So I think I'm clutching at straws a little bit at the moment with the positives, but I do think there are positives to be had, and I think that's one of them, that we did come back into it and we were leading, and then it's always really frustrating, as Becky touched on, when you then do get yourselves ahead and then you end up losing it right in the last minute. But it's better than completely, it's 1 point is better than no points.
Yeah, this is true, and I think that's the most frustrating thing for most of us at the moment, in terms of obviously not being able to get those wins at home, especially just at times you see us away from, and it's a totally different kind of aspect. And there's probably something I want to touch on, Becky. I know we will get into the game, but it is that kind of home atmosphere at the moment. It's kind of like you can understand why fans are getting frustrated, and then you're also on the second foot. You can, like, if you're not pushing your team on, you can't expect to kind of get those good results, if that makes sense.
I think the players have kind of tried to mention it, haven't they? That I think everything kind of gets exasperated a little bit. If and I'll keep going back to the Chelsea game, but there was a lot of kind of goal kicks that were going straight out, or there were free kicks that were being passed and played backwards, or there were corners that were going straight to their keeper, and that sort of stuff. You just hear the groans, and I think the players kind of realise that they're in this kind of pressure that if they lose the ball, then there is going to be a kind of a little bit of negativity. And I think, like I said, the Copenhagen game in the middle really kind of rejuvenated it and showed that if they play front foot attacking kind of football and they have some kind of solidity at the back, then the crowd will really support that. And I think you really noticed having Van der Ven and Romero back. I think as Ali just said, then the way Frank sets up is couldn't be more opposite to Ange, and we are going into games being a little bit more conservative, and it is quite a kind of defensive sort of organised sort of way about. The problem with that is if we don't score first, I think the players struggle then to kind of switch it up, which I think is why, to be fair to Frank on Saturday, he made the changes and made kind of different attacking changes. And you could just see the impact that Odebert and Udogie had, certainly down the left-hand side, which kind of gave that kind of impetus. I think Frank is starting to realise that Paulinho and Bentancur together at home games isn't working, so we've seen a kind of one or other approach. And I think, like you said, in away games, that kind of more defensive sort of way about works. But at home games, when teams want and fans want you to be sort of more, on the front foot and going at teams, at the moment, he's not quite worked out how that works. I think, Chelsea and United really were not great sides. They didn't kind of come and kind of blow us away, which I think is where the frustration comes from, because, we had a lot of players out and Man United just about got a draw. And really, if we'd had a much stronger side, we would have won that quite heavily. So I think, Frank's still very early into it. And I think maybe some people expect a little bit too much too quickly. We had this conversation on the ground on Saturday. We're like, what, I personally, compared to, all those defeats, was it 22 defeats last season and all those games at home that we were, often scoring first and went on to lose games. And as Ali said, there's games this year that we would have lost that we have actually drawn or gone on to win. That, where would we have expected them to be at the beginning of the season? Probably kind of, I said sort of 6th to 10th. At the end of the game on Saturday, we were 3rd. So I think, it's very early days. The table at the moment is very cramped, but I think people need to kind of give Frank a little bit more time. I think he's still working things out. He certainly hasn't got his strongest side by any means. And we are sort of, picking up points. It's the manner of the displays, I think, for me. Chelsea was probably one of the worst games I can remember for a long, long time, which is why Copenhagen and United have been quite refreshing, really. And it's almost like our momentum is kind of broken a little bit with the international break. And then the flip side of that actually is some of the players need a bit of a rest and get fit.
It is quite funny you mentioned international break, because I remember there was a time before where I'd long for international break to come around, and now it's kind of breaking that momentum a little bit. But you do make a very valid point, Becky, and I'll come to you for this one, Ali. Obviously, we've spoken about, before we go and get that goal first, obviously we were the ones that conceded the goal first against United. And kind of break it down for me, because it was frustrating. I still don't understand what Sarr's kind of thinking. I don't know whether it's a lack of communication or just concentration to fire it straight at Micky van de Ven, because I don't know what he was supposed to do with it.
The whole thing looked calamitous, didn't it? Like, as I say, I only saw the highlights and stuff, but that whole passage of play that ended up as the goal for United was just calamitous, and it's not the first time we've seen that this season, and that's what concerned me more, was that like Frank came in and kind of, I thought he'd fix the defense, to be honest. I was like, this is amazing. You know, we were hardly leaking any goals. We looked organised. The players looked like they knew what they were doing. Not just the back four, but the whole team looked so solid defensively. And they looked like they understood their roles and responsibilities so clearly. And then in recent games, it's just all those little errors are starting to creep back in. And that concerns me, because I think Frank is a very pragmatic person, and I genuinely think he is working through the phases of the pitch. So I think he has started defensively, which I thank him for, because Ange Ball was just chaos, let's be honest. And so he needed to start there. You can't leak that many goals and expect to achieve anything, really. So he started with defence, and I think he was trying to build and move into creation and midfield. And now all of a sudden it's gone a bit squiffy at the back again. So I actually think this international break's quite well timed, because I think it allows them a bit of a reset and to work on a few things. But in terms of that first goal that we conceded against United, yeah, it just looked silly. It looked like schoolboy stuff. And so they definitely need to sort that out. And I think it's this, we talk about it a lot at the moment with this playing out from the back. And playing out from the back is beautiful when it works. And you can't just lump the ball up the pitch for 90 minutes, because it will just keep coming back at you. Like, you do have to have patterns of play. But decision making, like, sometimes emergency defending is not a bad option. Like, if you just need to get rid of it, it's fine. And so I think, yeah, there's an element of our players having that autonomy when they're on the pitch to be like, you know what, I'm just going to launch this, and if someone boos me for it, then fine, but I feel that in this moment I just need to get rid of it.
I think that was the biggest thing for me, because again, it's just bizarre how Sarr kind of, like I said, the concentration, the kind of communication with Mickey, the kind of awareness of where he was on the pitch, it just was non-existent. And then Becky, for the actual goal itself, we obviously don't clear it very well, and then we don't switch on to stop the cross from coming in.
Yeah, and in the stadium, Van der Ven absolutely roared at Sarr. Like, you know, I was watching it back, because the thing is, I've said this when I post on X, there are enough replays of what happens, and you certainly don't see enough. So I'm kind of seeing everything in real time, and then if I then go and find it on my phone, I see it again. But I don't tend to do that, and then I tend to drive all the way back home, and then I see it either on Match of the Day or the next day. So when I actually watched it back, I was like, yeah, it kind of Sarr gets it, and you just think he's got. It's a bit like I'm going to keep going back to Chelsea, but it's like the goal against Chelsea. It looked like he had loads of time, and he absolutely wellied it at Van der Ven. He then sort of almost misjudged the bounce. But I think also the kind of second phases of play as well is quite poor. It kind of goes back out to the side. The cross comes over, and Bueno is just kind of between two defenders, and Vicario is kind of like flat-footed. So there's quite a lot of it that's all a bit sort of frustrating, really. I think you're right. There's kind of we all felt that went for that phase of not conceding goals, and we really thought this is something to kind of build on. And I think maybe it's the games, and it's still them getting used to the kind of the way things are played differently. And yeah, but I think what teams have realised is if you put a little bit of pressure on the defence and maybe that kind of midfield, with Xavi, as much as I love Xavi, he's a bit like Maddison in the sense if you kind of close him down very quickly, he more often than not does lose the ball, and then you've got that kind of turnover very quickly. I think you can see that kind of urgency that they're struggling with, and then they start to panic, and then they kind of all shout at each other, and Vicario comes running out and trying to help everybody, but sometimes he's at fault as well. So yeah, I think there's a frustration because they know that as soon as we concede a goal, the atmosphere drops. Because I thought the atmosphere at the start of the game was very, very good at both Chelsea and United, and the supporters were kind of doing their bit. And then once, and the thing is, wasn't it like 40 minutes was just before half time as well, which is just an awful time to concede, I think.
Yeah, it was a combination of all different things as well. And then obviously, I know we'll probably get onto it, but Ali as well, I feel like at the moment, I know it's because of maybe injuries and maybe Frank not really knowing what his best kind of combination is at the moment, but it just felt very disjointed between the midfield and the strike force. And I know it was interesting to see Kolo through the middle, obviously Johnson on one side and Richarlison on the other. And something had to happen at half time, which it did. But for you, what would you think for Frank is the best kind of thing to do? Because whatever he's kind of trying at the minute just isn't working.
Yeah, I think, as you say, it is a sticky one for him because I think he probably does know what his what his first 11 is, but they're not available, right? So, um, and again, he's managing more than one competition, and he's managing that rotation, and he's managing other little niggles that we don't know about. We know about the injured players, but we don't know about all the other little knocks and things, and the pain. A lot of players play in pain as well, which is awful, but that's the gig. So I think it's easy for us to sort of sit back and go, well, why haven't you played him? Or why have you played him there? But they've got all this data at their disposal that we just don't have. So I think that's important to remember. But I feel like with Moani, it was unfortunate, wasn't it? Because then he's got this injury, which apparently now isn't he doesn't need surgery on his jaw, so that's good, because that would have been him out even longer. But he is turning into a little bit of a sick note sort of loan signing, isn't he? Bless him. And he's missed some good chances as well for us, like not difficult chances that you'd expect him. That's why we signed him, right? So I do feel like he needs to get fit and he needs to get a goal, because then I think we'll see what he's truly capable of. But I don't know when. Let me know when you want to talk about Richarlison, because I just can't. I
was gonna say, should we just open the can now? Should we just open the can of worms now?
Like, I personally, and I don't mind getting shot down in the comments or social media afterwards, it's fine. Come at me. It's fine. I personally wouldn't play Richarlison anywhere. So I feel like he's not, say we want to be a top 6 team, right? Ideally top 4, but let's start realistically. Let's aim to be a top 6 team. What other top 6 club is he getting into? None of them. None of them. And what frustrates me about having Richarlison as an option is that then Frank kind of will use him, and any manager will use him, because what are your other options? And I just don't think he's worth it. I think he's more disruptive. And my issues with him as well is, apart from his lack of ability, and I know he scored a worldie at the beginning of the season and everyone got carried away. That was your moment, people. I hope you enjoyed it, because that's all you're getting out of Richarlison this season. But my real issue with him is his mentality, because he's just so obviously a player that sulks. And like, one of the things I think you actually have to give the rest of the squad credit for at the moment is that even when the fans get annoyed, and they're well within their rights to get annoyed, those seats aren't cheap, right? But even when the fans get annoyed, look at Saturday, those players still dragged a result out of that game. They turned it around. And yes, we didn't get the win, but they still turned the game around. Whereas I don't think Richarlison necessarily helps with that. Yes, he's ended up getting this flick off his neck or wherever that ball ended up coming off him for the goal. But the rest of his play, for me, isn't good enough. So that's my rant about Richarlison. But basically, I want to sell him so that he's not an option, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And the thing is, this was my kind of thought process as well, because Becky, when I saw, obviously we now know why Kolo came off, but when we saw Frank make that change, I was adamant it was going to be Richie at halftime. I mean, what's your kind of take on Richarlison straight off the bat? What have you made of him so far, especially in that game as well?
Well, so first of all, going back to what you said about the half time, I think when we all came out, when he stopped and everyone went, yeah, Odebert's just gone for Moani, we were all like, huh? Why? I think, to be fair to Paul Moani, if he had a dead leg or if he just wasn't match fit, he actually came off one of his probably better games on Tuesday. And we thought that he was really going to kick on, and then gets this kind of, accidental elbow and fractures his jaw. But none of us realised that at all. No one realised that. And then we all were like, oh, well, surely you would have taken Richarlison if he was going to make any changes. Because the thing is about the two of Richarlison and Moani is that Kolo Moani, they do interchange a lot. The kind of change between being up front and being left happens a lot. And I personally think that the best placed position for Richarlison is on the left wing. because you could hand it to him on a plate, as we saw at Newcastle when he plays up front, and he just can't do it. And there was one early on in the first half. I think it was a cross from Johnson. It came across, and because they went the wrong way round, so they went to the south stand first half. That was where I was. You just felt like it was just going to be Richarlison just going to head it in, and the goalie didn't come out for it. Their goalie seemed very tentative with crosses. Johnson put a really good cross. Richarlison, it just kind of scooped over the top of his blonde hair, and that kind of summed it up really. And I think had Moani been there, you would have think that they would at least be shot on target. So yeah, there was this kind of frustration again as to why is that substitution happened, which I think is fueled why you had more of a reaction to when Xavi went off. And I think the two things are interconnected, but at the time people didn't realise why. But yeah, I think Ali said it. I was on holiday for the Burnley game. We were watching it in Lanzarote, and we couldn't believe the goal that he scored. But then, kind of to flip that round, actually we can, because Marseille is still in my head. We have those goals against Marseille, and then we never see him again. And this was the same, where there's goals against Burnley, and then we never see him again. And the only time I can really, really remember him ever stepping up was when Son was at the Asian Cup, or he was injured, and I forget which. And Richarlison scored something like 5 consecutive games or 4 consecutive games, or had all this kind of run of goals. And it was like, right, the problem this year with Solanke not being fit is Richarlison hasn't stepped up in that same way. Now, we could spend a whole YouTube channel tonight talking about how we've got no goals and assists from Solanke, we're not going no goals and assists from Son, or Maddison, or Kulusevski. And I know that makes a massive difference. But from Richarlison's point of view, this is his opportunity to step up. And he just hasn't. Now, we have this conversation where I stand in the South Stand, because I'd like to think I'm very lucky. The people we stand with are all fairly level-headed. And they'll say, well, he doesn't get the service, and whoever's up there doesn't get the service. And But if you watch Richarlison in the stadium, and I saw someone put this on Twitter today, he doesn't anticipate enough. And we're not comparing him to Kane, but when you've got a cross coming in, you should be on the front of the defender, or he should always be on the kind of shoulder of the defender. And he just doesn't, and he doesn't get there. And I think that was exasperated at Newcastle. And you can see Kolo Muani has that kind of instinct as an attacker, and he does get in those counters. Richarlison doesn't. He stayed on his feet a lot more on Saturday than he did in previous games, which I think is a positive. But it's just not enough. And I think Ali's right. It's very much about him. The celebration, I know we'll come to it in chronological order, but the celebration for the goal, I didn't actually, from where I was, realise it was Richarlison. I thought it was odebert. I thought it was a fantastic curling cross. And then when I saw him with his shirt off and him doing his kind of celebration, I was thinking, oh my God, he better not be offside. Because the way he stands in those kind of positions, you imagine if we'd had that and he'd taken his shirt off, much like the Liverpool people remember in the chat. I remember it was right in front of me at the Liverpool game, and him and Son were doing it. And then it waves down the other end and Moura loses the ball and they score. So it's kind of, he'd done all that celebration, taking his shirt off, all of that, fantastic. He was crying and everyone's hugging him, fantastic. You imagine if he'd been standing in an offside position. Thankfully, he wasn't. But it's this kind of, it's just, he's a great guy, and I love the fact that off the field he loves Spurs and he's always bantering different supporters and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, we need him to be a number 9. And I think when Solanke was fit last year, he really saw the difference in the two of them, which is why last year Richarlison played more on the left, even in the Europa League final. Is Solanke holds the ball up so much better. He can kind of play with his back to goal, play it backwards, maybe to Xavi, and then we're on an attack. And Richarlison just doesn't do that. And unfortunately, Moani hasn't shown himself that yet either. So I think looking ahead, it's probably now with Moani being injured, it's going to be probably because Tal can't play in the PSG game. Richarlison's going to play in PSG, you assume, and Tal will play in the North London derby because, like you just said, Frank is at a situation where he can't play them both. And is that a mistake on his part? Should Tal have been put in the Champions League squad in the first place? I had this discussion with my friend a while ago. We were always going to get injuries, but they are, I know, allowed to swap somebody in, but they haven't done that for Solanke. So we just don't know. So yeah, I think going back to him, he's a great guy, but I literally was on Saturday going, oh my God, if he ends up being offside, I'm going to go absolutely crazy. Thankfully he didn't. Actually, he definitely meant it as well. You know what Richarlison's like. But yeah, I just think we needed him to step up, and unfortunately he hasn't. And that's where, like you said, he's very much the confidence player. He's very much a confidence player, and the goal had done him good, but then we didn't end up winning the game because of it.
This is true, and I think it's quite funny because I was doing a watch along, and even I thought it was Odebert's goal. I was getting up screaming Odebert scored, and it was Richie that kind of flicked it on. I mean, Ali, I hate to be the person, because there's been lots of times when I've spoken about players not performing, etc., etc., and I do forget at the end of the day they are human. My only kind of caveat to that would be, you're a professional footballer. If you've got something going on, maybe you shouldn't be putting it into this environment where you're being forced, you need to provide something. Because I think that's the biggest thing for me. And that's why I thought Richie would have come off earlier, if that made sense, because he clearly wasn't at his best. He clearly wasn't, I don't think, mentally in the right kind of frame of mind to be playing this game.
Yeah, and it's tricky to know, isn't it? Because, like I said, with the other information, we don't have that either, so we don't know what's going on there. But the thing is with Richie and players like him as well is that I don't think it's just because of things that may or may not be happening in their personal life. I think it's sports psychology as well. You get some players who are just mentally tough, and you get some other players who aren't, and you have to manage them quite differently as a result. And I just think for Richie, like the minute it's not working, there's a strop and there's a sulk and there's a like, and that's hard to play with as well. That's hard for his teammates. And you know who it's great for? The opposition. Because they're not idiots. They're going to spot that immediately and they will wind him up and wind him up and wind him up until he goes. And so I just think, yes, players absolutely are people. But I think with Richie, I think it's more than just whatever may or may not be happening in his personal life. I think it's actually a competition sports psychology issue as well. A sort of, I think he lacks that toughness, especially in that position, because strikers, that's the metric, right? That they value the most is goals. And if you're not getting goals, and that's why we saw, like, Becky described that very emotional reaction from him. I mean, obviously, the minute he whips his shirt off, you're not winning anyway, because that's classic him. But you always see a very emotional reaction from Richie when he scores, because it tells you what he's like, because he puts so much value in scoring goals that when it's not happening, it devastates him. So when it does happen, it's like, doesn't even really matter if it's the goal that's won it or not for him. It's like, it's his goal. So he's overjoyed. But yeah, so I think, yes, like, let's be kind to them. They are people. But with all the love in the world, I just want us to sell him.
It is available, and I think there is rumours about him potentially being sold back to Everton. And again, it's just frustrating. These things don't necessarily work out, but I think it is coming to a head now that we need to do something, because it's not working. But obviously,
Sorry to interrupt, Hollie, but the rumours that I've heard is that he won't leave. People have said for 2 or 3 seasons that you've got X, Y, and Z places to go, and he loves it here so much that he doesn't want to leave. So unless Thomas Frank turns around and says, you're not going to be playing, I'm going to stick you in the under-21s, which he's not going to do to Brazilian number 9, this is the problem. He loves it here and he doesn't want to go. And we had discussions about whether Dane Scarlett should be stepping up now that Kolo is injured. I think I tweeted that I think it was he should have taken the penalty in the week. But again, they'll have done that to help Richarlison's confidence, but he missed it anyway. So I mean, so it's like, but yeah, I don't think he wants to go. He likes it here. So unless he's actually told he's going, or they make a huge loss on him, or he goes on loan or something like that, I don't think he's that keen on going.
No, it is a difficult one, and when you've got players that don't want to leave, it's even harder to kind of shift them out the door. So it will be kind of interesting to see what kind of happens. But Becky, I'll kind of stick with you, because obviously we've spoken heavily about Richie, but I want to talk about the man that I think made a lot of difference, and that is Odebert. And I think he should have potentially started in that game, because he's a player that excites me. He takes his man on. He's not afraid to go inside. I mean, even for I think it was the first goal, sorry, with Tell, he drives forward, lays the ball off to Doggy, and Doggy kind of puts it through. But what have you kind of made of Odebert, so to speak, making and stepping into that kind of winger position?
Yeah, and I think he did very well. I just said it earlier in the show, him and Udogie link up really well. Having a left-footed left back seems so obvious, but it just really works. And I think, I was saying this on the way home, I don't think it's a coincidence that Tal was playing as well, because there's been lots of times this season where Tal and Odebert have played together. And I think they have that kind of connection with being in the French under-21s, and they know each other and that as well. So again, that more compounds this idea that Richarlison, if you're going to play Richarlison, who do you put on the left wing? So I think, like I said, he's not totally sure, but going back to your question about Odebert himself, I think he did phenomenally well, and that's what was getting the crowd. They want to see someone take players on, and he did that, and the kind of, like I said, you're quite right, the way he kind of played and was bringing the ball around together, and that kind of was injecting that sort of pace and energy that we needed, because, like I said, Frank's way is a little bit static. And I think that's where the kind of the sideways backwards back to Vicario stuff. I think it was clear this week you didn't see that as much. Definitely not as much. There were times when Paulino would drop a shoulder. Bentancur did a couple of times. I also would like to say that I think Bentancur made a difference when he came on. There's a lot of people that follow me on X who do not like Bentancur, and I think somebody found a stat in the week that in so many games that he's gone off in, we've conceded when he's not been on the pitch. So it's quite nice to kind of flip that around. He was playing when we scored this time, so read into that what you will. But I think, that kind of confidence to be able to take players on. Odebert's still young, but he seems kind of fearless rather than, like you said, Richarlison is very much, trudges if he gets booked, if he gets subbed, and he, it's all kind of like head down and that sort of thing. And I think Odebert is just prepared to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. And I think we haven't mentioned it so much, but it's so different to the way Johnson is on the right hand side. So Johnson very rarely will take players on. He's doing it a little bit more in recent games, but it's not natural to him. I had a conversation with somebody the other day about, say Richarlison gets injured in the next week or so, Johnson could go up front, but Frank doesn't seem to like that. So he sticks Johnson out on the right wing and doesn't really get that involved. If Spence doesn't kind of interplay with Johnson, he's a kind of bit out of it. And I think that's why someone's put in the comment there. The kind of connection between Odebert and Udogie was really evident. It was working really, really well. I think before Xavi went off, even between the three of them, and that kind of triangle was working quite well. And then, of course, the substitution came. But we'll come on to that a bit later on. But yeah, I think Odebert, he's great, certainly growing into it. It's funny because when he's playing really well, everyone's like, oh, he's young and he's hungry. And when he's playing poor, everyone goes, well, that's what you get if you buy Burnley players. It's like the poor lad can't win.
No, and I think that is the sad truth sometimes of our fan base. We want everything all or nothing, basically. I mean, Ali, for you, I think, again, obviously we know he's young, we know he's adapting his game, but like Becky's kind of said, it's kind of a different comparison between him and Johnson. You're excited to see him take on his man, and I think obviously if that little flick from Richie didn't go in, he would have got a goal and an assist. So things are kind of turning up for him.
Yeah, and I just think it's about patience. Like, these are young players, and they are playing in the most competitive league in the world. Like, the Premier League is tough, and it's relentless, and the pace of it is insane. And so, you don't have time to find your feet. Basically, you've just, it's all got to happen. And I think it takes a few games, and especially for players that aren't consistently in the starting 11, that's even harder. How do you find that consistency? How do you get that practice? You can do all the practice in the world on a training pitch, but you can't replicate that intensity of what it's like playing in the Premier League. And so, the more he gets to do that, the better he will become. And I think for Frank now, because this international break is interesting now to see how he sets up against Arsenal and what he kind of goes for. And obviously a lot of that also depends on the progress those injured players have made in that time as well. But I think, football is a game about form, and it's the informed players in those moments that will get you results. And I think, obviously, like, Udogie is still, there's minutes being managed there because of an injury, and we don't want to rush things like that. We do want him at his best. So you understand that. But players like Tell and Odebert, I'm like, give them a go. I mean, I personally would love to see Dane Scarlett. I'd play Dane Scarlett over Richarlison. I'll tell you that for free. And I think he should have been able to take that penalty. 100% should have been. He won it. I think he would have made the keeper work. Let's put it that way.
And that's the thing as well. I think the fact that we were 4-0 up, just let the kids have a chance of taking a pen, especially when he won it. But again, that's a whole nother different kind of conversation within itself. There's probably one sort of thing that I do want to talk about. I know we've touched on Tell, and I know we have touched on Odebert, but I also want to talk about maybe some of these substitutions. I know we touched on maybe Richarlison should have come off rather than Kolo, but now we know it's obviously because of an injury to Kolo's jaw. But I'm feeling very sorry, Becky, for Simmons at time. He can't really seem to catch a break. Obviously, had to come off against Copenhagen because of Johnson's red card. Obviously, then he got, I think it was about 80 minutes, didn't he, against United. I just feel like he can never catch a break. Do you think that's because Frank's trying to embed him in slowly, or do you think maybe Frank thinks that he needs to offer a bit more?
I think it's a combination of the two, and I think it depends who you speak to. I think if you speak to Frank, Frank does say that he's trying to get him kind of physically to kind of adjust to the Premier League. I think the reason why there was the huge reaction is, as I said before, is that people felt that maybe Frank was bringing on Odebert when he should have taken off Richarlison, and he didn't, but now we know why. And then, like I said, when he then takes Xavi off, and I think it's because of the order of the way the subs were put up, it made it look like he was bringing Bentancur on for Xavi, which we know wasn't. So is this sort of idea that, that's quite a negative thing, you've taken off our only creative player, and some people are still sort of arguing that maybe Tell is not quite the player that we want him to be yet. But again, he's young, and that's where the reaction came from. And I think even the fact that Match Today decided to put it in their edit that there was a huge amount of booing for him. The thing for Tell that's great is that he capitalised really quickly, scored really quickly. Didn't go off and celebrate an equaliser. He was like, done, brilliant, let's get going again. And I think, to be fair, Tell, that's what the fans really want to see. Going back to Xavi, I think I've said this for about 3 or 4 weeks now. He just needs a goal. He just needs one of them ones that goes in off the back of his head or something, or the back of him, because it is like he's almost trying to score the perfect goal. And then if he doesn't get as involved, maybe Frank is saying, right, we're going to come off, we're going to try and make changes. And that's where I think he's almost trying to kind of just get on with it. Just get it done, get it out of the system, and then we're fine. But I think Frank is sort of saying, well, we have to make changes somewhere. I think it's just the frustration was you've taken off one of our most creative players. In hindsight, we look back at it and go, actually, Tell played quite well. Him and Odebert, as I said before. So actually, it was not a bad decision. But had that not been the case, then, and by the way, I think Tell's turn and finish was fantastic. I think really, really, I think I kind of got lost in the kind of Richarlison celebration a bit. It was a fantastic goal. And I think you could see Xavi's frustrated, but again, Van de Ven was frustrated at the Chelsea game. He comes back and scores from his own half. So I think sometimes it's about that, isn't it? And about how Frank is managing the players themselves. But I do think Xavi, I had said this with Kudus, once Kudus had kind of got a goal, you just sort of feel like it's just much freer. And I said that with Tell, and then Tell scored at Leeds. So I think if, Xavi scoring will help. It's certainly not a case of, Kulusevski comes in and then Xavi's going to be benched. I do think Frank's approach is actually, he uses his squad quite well. I got quite frustrated last year at Ange. He just played and played and played players until the point that they were literally playing on one leg. So Frank is quite good at kind of managing minutes and making sure that, there's a kind of sharpness and a freshness. However, it looks a little bit like he doesn't know who his team is, if that makes sense. But I think, to be fair to Frank, he's actually trying to kind of keep players fresh.
And I think that's, like you say, obviously the moans and groans when Xavi came off and you saw kind of Tell come on. But again, it kind of worked well for him. And I'm not saying it was luck, because obviously that finish from Tell, that turn to create that space, was really good. And Ali, that's the thing for me. I don't mind if Frank does things like that and it plays off. It's obviously when they don't go right and you're thinking, why are you taking our most creative player off?
Yeah, it's I feel like I keep repeating myself, but I do just think, like, we'll never know. We'll never know what else is going, because there's so many moving parts, especially with substitutions. Like, sometimes you're subbing a player because you want to see how they work with another player and things like that. And unfortunately for players, sometimes they are the one that's just like, okay, that's going to have to be me then. Like, it's gutting for them, but it's the way it goes now. And we'd rather have that competition for places as well than, oh, well, we're just going to have to play them because everyone else is injured. So, it's a good thing. It's a healthy headache, but it is a headache. I think it probably did seem weird. Like, I'm not Frank. I haven't got a hotline to him. Like, I don't know his rationale for a lot of his stuff. I think, as we've said before, though, a lot of it is him. He is still so early on in his Spurs career, and I think I'm just like, patience. And I know that's not fun for fans. It's not fun for fans to be patient. We want it all yesterday, and I get that. But I think the coach in me sometimes is like, let him work out the puzzle, guys, and I think it always looks more straightforward from the outside, but he's got the information that we don't have, and there will be lots of reasons why he doesn't play those two together, or he doesn't think that's going to work, and blah blah blah. And I think he's trying to work it out. He's trying to manage multiple competitions. I think just at least give him the season. I think I know there's already fans writing him off, and I'm like, that's insane to me. How can you write off a manager in November? Like, what are you talking about? So yeah, I'm still a fan of Thomas Frank. I think he's very pragmatic. I think he's a details man, which is what I think we were missing with Ange. I think he's very tactically astute. Even though sometimes his substitutions might suggest otherwise. And I think he's just working out the puzzle. And I genuinely believe there's a lot of potential there. And I hope the club gives him the time to work it all out.
No, it's a great take. And Becky, I want to come to you on that final front as well, on your takes on Frank, because I'm kind of in a bit of a divide at the moment. I think I'm still sad that Ange went, but I know if Ange was still here, I don't think it would be a pretty sight. So what's your kind of take on Frank so far under this regime at Spurs?
Yeah, like I said before, compared to what it was for the last two seasons, me and Jack got to a point in the league, certainly last year, that we just didn't enjoy going to games. You know, we were driving all that way down and thinking, oh, what are we going to get today? Are we going to get this kind of really obvious, easily readable kind of game where Ange isn't going to change tactics for who we're playing? We're just going to play the same way every time, flinching every time somebody does a run because you think they're going to get a hamstring. And to this year, where it's almost like a little bit too lethargic, that's probably the wrong word, but too kind of, cautious. And we could do with somewhere in the middle. I do get concerned for some games that if we score first, we then, certainly at home, struggle to kind of change things up. But we noticed this week he did make some subs to change things up. I think it's a little bit, like you said, he's still kind of bedding in. He's still trying to work out who he is. I really feel we needed a change of manager. So for me, that was the right decision. Despite Ange winning the Europa League, we couldn't go on the way we were playing. It was just, if you think about the amount of losses last season and the teams that we lost to, it just wasn't. I wasn't going to work moving forward. So it was the right decision to make. But then you think, when Ange arrived, Ange had lost Kane. Frank has arrived, he's lost Son. He's then had all these numerous injuries. So I think we do need to give him time for that, and I hope that the club give him time for that. I think some of the things he said about atmosphere and about the crowd, I think is a little bit, he needs to be careful there, because that is never going to go down that well. However, I do think sometimes it's taken out of context. It was, it's pleasing that we still seem to be doing so well in Champions League. I think, points away from home in Europe are hard to come by. Again, if you kind of, dive down into the kind of the nature of where we played in those games, there are some concerns. But if you kind of take that away a little bit and think, actually, okay, we've got PSG coming up, we've got Dortmund, we've got some tough games. I like the fact that he is kind of managing the squad. I just would like to see how things go when he gets his full team back. No one ever plays with their full team. No one ever plays with their perfect squad. Everybody's always got injuries. As soon as we get players back, there'll be somebody else go. There just will be. But I would like to see how we are when we've got our more kind of creative players back. But yeah, in answer to your question, I think, I think he knows what he wants to do to put it right, but at the moment he hasn't got that at his disposal, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when he does.
I think that's the thing. I mean, bar obviously the goals that we kind of created our own problems for in the United game. I mean, the one right at the dying end, the lit header. Obviously, we could have probably defended that better. Maybe Vicario done a little bit better. But Ali, I know we've spoken about it already, and the fact that he's trying to shore up that defence. And like Becky said, hopefully when we get those more attacking players back in, we'll finally get to see the Frank that was brought to Spurs. Because you're right, I think at the moment we are being a bit too cautious.
Yeah, I think, like we said earlier, I think he is working his way up the pitch, and I think he had to start with defence because otherwise it would have just been last season on repeat, to be honest. So I think he was right to do that. I think the sort of whatever's not gelling and clicking in terms of creating and finishing, I think again he's just going to have to work on it. I don't think he is this. A lot I've seen in the comments people saying Nuno point two. Like I personally don't think that he is. I think he also enjoys, like, he wants his team to win, right? And how do you win football games? By scoring goals. So he knows that that's an important part of the game. And this is what I think is different about Thomas Frank, is that even if he's not this really like excitable, ranting and raving on the touchline kind of big character, like, I don't think he's a big character of a manager. And I think that's what some fans don't like about their managers. They want them to be larger than life. And I don't think he is. But it's like he understands the game. He's very intelligent. And so, yes, he'll want us to play attractive, creative, attacking football, even if it's purely just because he wants us to score. Do you know what I mean? Like, even if he's not that fussed about how the ball goes in the net, he's like, no, yeah, if I've got these creative players, let them be creative. I think part of the issue at the moment is this working out what the best, like, we know what our best defense is. He knows what his best defense is. I don't think he's worked out the puzzle of midfield and attack, but I don't think he can because the players aren't fit. So he's trying to work out, like, I wouldn't even say it's the B team. It's like a C team of what he can do in those parts of the pitch. And that picture's always changing, frustratingly, because, as Becky alluded to, the minute someone gets out off the treatment bench, another person gets injured. So it's a movable feast. I think he is working it out, but I think to say that he is only defensive minded is unfair on him as a coach. I think, like, even like, and people can make fun of like long throws and set pieces and stuff, but even that, like, he specifically brought in an expert with him to bear fruit in that way. And the thing is, like, let's all be honest. So at the moment, we're 5th in the league and we're undefeated in the Champions League. Now, if you'd have offered that to any Spurs fan at the beginning of this season, said that's where you're at before the international break in November, they'd have bitten your hand off. So if that means that sometimes some of those goals are because Danso's just launched it and Micky van der Ven, of all people, has headed it in at the back post, yeah, you take it, because whilst you're still trying to work out all of the moving parts, you take the goals how you can. So I think, yes, he started at defence. I do think he has sorted that out significantly, but there's obviously still work to be done.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I think you both kind of hit the nail on the head in the sense of where we kind of are at with Frank. And I think you're right. I think if you kind of take yourself out and take your Spurs hat off to see where we are in the league, how we're doing in Champions League, after, like we said, the amount of injuries and losing players, etc., it's not too shabby. I'm not going to put it out there. I'm going to put it out there. So with that being said, obviously we've got international break and then we've got 2 massive games coming up. Now, Becky, obviously we've got Arsenal and then we've got PSG. Now, we won't completely dissect them or kind of preview what that's going to be like, but how do you kind of see/feel that kind of going?
Well, it's a positive that Arsenal have started conceding goals again, because I think it was like the 9th game without, when they conceded against Sunderland, and it was great. I was listening to that game as I was coming back in the car, and the one thing I would say about Sunderland is that in the first half, certainly their intent was to just press, and Arsenal couldn't cope with it. I think in the second half they kind of sat back a little bit, and then Arsenal kind of found their shape. So again, thinking what Ali just said then about how Frank is going to approach the game, is he going to approach that a press, or is he going to be more kind of defensive and go on the counter attack? So it's one of my least looking forward to fixtures of the season anyway, the North London derby. The only time I can ever really, in recent memory, really remember it enjoying one is that Thursday night one when we got into top four with Conte. So it's not always an enjoyable fixture. So I think it's hard. You hear people say, "Oh, it's an international break." It's not a break, because if they're fit, they go off to their countries and they play and then they come back. Those that don't go off and do that are the ones that are injured or are trying to get back into form and fitness. So I do hope that those, as the Gold said something today, there's about 5 players that have stayed behind, haven't gone off of their countries, and hopefully they will get themselves to fitness. So I think if we have Kudus back for the North London derby, that's a massive help, hopefully. Keeps talking about Solanke. Even if Solanke miraculously recovers in the next 2 weeks, he's not going to start that game, is he? So I think Kudus is an important one. And then you kind of move to PSG after that. Depending how things go with Arsenal. I don't know. I don't even know whether this early in the season, and Thomas Frank would say, well, let's kind of approach the PSG in a different way when they approach the Arsenal game, because the PSG game, it has an impact on whether we can finish in the top 8 in the Champions League. I don't know. So again, even the 2 games, I would imagine he's already got a game plan for each one, and it may be completely different. Like I said before about Tottenham and Richarlison, obviously can't play both games each, so it's about how that works. I agree with Ali. I think he does know his strongest defence. Hopefully Porro doesn't get injured, in Spanish duty as well. So we kind of, that kind of idea that, it's a tough. This is why people are saying the fixtures from kind of Chelsea onwards are tough. They are tough. I think we've then got Fulham the other side of that, who haven't won away yet this season. Oh, you've got Tottenham. Comes Tottenham, where we're not very good at home. So it's like Ali said, every game is tough in the Premier League, and then you've got the Champions League ones dotted in between. And it shows that despite us playing Frankfurt and Bodo Glimt and Chelsea played Karabag, those teams are Champions League worthy teams. It isn't, everyone was saying we beat these really easy teams in the Europa League last year. A fair chunk of them have got in the Champions League this year, so that tells you a lot about the standard of the teams that we're playing. So it's a tough. I think Frank is probably wanting to get to kind of January and kind of see where we are. Things like in January. I very much agree with this idea of he's just got to kind of make the puzzles work, and I like the long throws, and I like the fact that we score from corners. I just hope that teams don't kind of work us out a bit too much. But I think those sort of ways of playing are refreshing, really. If they get us goals, then so be it.
I think that's the thing. Any way to get that ball in the back of the net, I don't really care. But Ali, for you as well, I mean, is there anything that you want to say, obviously, on those 2 fixtures coming up? Because, like we say, they are coming up thick and fast, and they are becoming difficult ones.
Yeah, pretty grim, to be honest, isn't it? But I think someone put in the chat, like, there's probably no too hard of fixtures away at the moment. I think the Arsenal game will be interesting. First of all, I agree with Becky. Like, I don't enjoy the fixture. Like, even when we win, it's only a fixture that you can ever enjoy retrospectively. You never enjoy it in the 90 minutes. I think Arsenal will be interesting, and especially because of the vibe among the fan base at the moment at Spurs. And I think Frank will know that he's got to go for it. I don't mean gung ho. I don't want to see him do an Ange. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. It's too much. But I think he understands the history of the fixture, and he knows that it's important, and the players will be up for it and everything. And also Arsenal, like, it's a bit annoying that it's at the Emirates, but we're a bit rubbish at home at the moment. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise. And I do just think Arsenal, even though once historically they're not invincible. Like, they are beatable. And wouldn't it be lovely if it was Spurs to just remind everyone of that? So I think it will be an interesting one. What I hope for that is that even if we lose, just don't get battered. Just don't let it be embarrassing. And as for PSG, like, it's Champions League, baby. That's why you play this competition. That's who the teams that these players want to play against, if we're honest. And let's hope that's entertaining on the eye, if nothing else.
Defo, 100%. Like I say, it's going to be interesting after this international break. I'm crossing my fingers that nobody gets injured, and those that are staying at home can try and get to back to some sort of kind of fitness, because that would be nice going into those next kind of run of fixtures with as strong as a squad we can have. But I've thoroughly enjoyed tonight. It's been nice to kind of dissect, obviously, the draw against United and looking ahead to fixtures coming up. So we'll go around the table and say our goodbyes. So Becky, thank you once again for coming on the show. Where can everybody find you doing your thing?
Usually at the game, if you see me in the game, or you see me and Jack in the South Stand or by the Kolo bar, say hello. I get lots of people going, "Hi Becky," and I go, "Hi." I don't know who you are, but hi, thanks for coming to say hello. My handle is Becky D Becky on X, and it's very similar on Blue Sky as well if you're on that. But yeah, I said to kind of off air, I think is this the first time there's been an all-female YouTube channel for Spurs? I don't know, but I think if it is, that's a fantastic thing. And long may it continue. But yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been fantastic. This is me. This is what I do. I just enjoy talking about Spurs, and I love going to games. And if I can kind of give my take on being there, then it's fantastic. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, thank you, Becky. Like I say, it's been good fun tonight, so thank you. And Ali, thank you as well for coming on. Where can everybody find you doing your thing as well?
Thank you so much for inviting me on my debut. I do feel bad I wasn't in a Spurs shirt. I'm sorry. So I'm predominantly on Instagram. I'm trying to do TikTok, but I think I might be too old for it. But I'm giving it my best shot. So I'm on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at Coach Ali. And I am also co-chair and co-founder of Women of the Lane, Tottenham Hotspur's first ever official supporters association for women who support Tottenham men's team. So Google Women of the Lane as well. And if there are any women in the chat, I've mostly seen men so far, but if there are any women, or you've got any family members or friends or whatever that are women that support Spurs men's team, please do Google Women of the Lane and sign up and join us and be in that number.
Love that. No, thank you both. And like I say, it has actually been quite nice to have a panel of just us girls on tonight, which has actually been quite fun. So definitely need to do more of that in the future. And like I say, thank you to everybody else that's been tuning in tonight, that's going to rewatch this later. I do really, really appreciate it. Like I say, I've been a bit slow on doing Hollie's Hotspurs for a little while now. So I'm glad to be back tonight. Like I say, we've got international break, so there might be a video out at some point next week, but there'll be no live. And then we'll be back for the following week to obviously dissect, hopefully, some sort of performance against Arsenal. But that kind of leaves me to say, until next time, come on you Spurs.